Hello, and thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of Storytime. Today's story is called Pandora's Box, and it's from my collection, Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. Pandora's Box. Disjointed and incomplete, the dream stayed in my mind long after awakening. A large, deep lake, and two people, silently moving underwater as though they were on dry land, toward an edge that led to a dark, unfathomably deep drop-off. Before them waited a large boulder, something from the Ice Age perhaps, and when they reached it, still silent, they rolled it toward the edge of the undersea precipice, pushing it until it fell down into the depths. Then, still not speaking, they walked back through the water until they reached the shore. I awoke thinking about rocks and boulders and heavy objects pushed into the depths, falling into the darkness, buried where no one can find them except the two people responsible for their disappearance, and perhaps even their existence. No one, that is, except an innocent, inquisitive child. When I was a child, I stumbled across a trunk, pushed far back into a darkened corner of the attic. At the time, we lived in an old farmhouse, and unlike modern homes with drop-down stairs leading to unfloored areas, this house boasted an attic with 10-foot-high raftered ceilings, oak floorboards, and dirt and web-encrusted window panes. Often I would climb the stairs to the second floor, pull open the heavy dark door next to the linen closet, and then mount the twisting, turning, narrow staircase that led to the attic. This was my hiding place, my refuge. I don't know if I knew even then what it was I was hiding from or looking for. When you're raised in an environment of extreme cold, do you know with any degree of certainty that a warmer clime exists? But I knew there were times when it was better to be unseen and unseeing, unheard and unhearing. I would take my doll and my patchwork blanket and sit next to the window, measuring the extent to which the spider's web had grown, while I waited for that indefinable moment when it was safe to return to the world I had left behind. On that day, the day I found the trunk, the wind rattling through a crack in the pane had destroyed the web. Robbed of my usual routine, I began casting about for something else to occupy my attention. There were cardboard cartons taped securely closed, and long dress bags holding out of season and undoubtedly out of style dresses. It was behind one of those that I found the trunk, bound with leather straps that had deteriorated from the temperature extremes common in poorly insulated spaces. I ran my finger across the top, oddly free of dust, and then carefully lifted the lid. The first layer consisted of yellowed tissue paper, but when I pushed it aside carelessly, like any other inquisitive 8-year-old, I found a layette resting beneath. Tiny blue booties with a cap to match. Soft cotton gowns with incredibly tiny buttons. Softer still, blankets and crib sheets. Everything a newborn could desire. And all in shades of blue from robin's egg to midnight. For a baby boy, I realized, and having no brothers, indeed being an only child, I was mystified. And then, being a child with a doll who only had one dress to her name and that one torn and dirty, I did what any child would do. I seized the nearest baby gown and ran downstairs to where my parents sat in silence in the small living room. "Can I have this?" I asked excitedly. "It would fit Abby and she would look so pretty in it." I was a child, but even at that age, the deeper silence that followed my words told me I had said something, done something so wrong, so incredibly dangerous to the tenuous peace of the household that there would be no going back. "Where did you find that?" my father asked finally, his voice quiet but with a harsh undercurrent that caused me to move closer to my mother. "Uh, Upstairs in the attic." But my words had barely left my mouth before they were drowned out by my father's voice, thick with anger, as I had never heard it before. "Get that out of here! Do you hear me? Throw it out! You told me!" He turned to my mother, who hadn't moved, yet seemed somehow to have left the room. "You told me you had gotten rid of everything, everything, after all that happened, and still you lied to me." My mother rose then and took the baby gown from my grasp while I stood there rooted to the spot, not knowing what to do. She held it gently, as though it still clothed an infant, and met my father's eyes in silence. I must have left the room at some point, or perhaps my father left first. Children's minds have a way of erasing events that are incomprehensible to them. All I know is that the next time I climbed the stairs to the attic, the trunk was gone. But its disappearance left a gap, not only in the space behind the stored clothes, but also in the relationship between my parents, a chasm deeper than the one that already existed. After that day, there were long periods of silence, and when they did speak, it was with a formality that only underscored the emotion beneath the surface, his an unyielding anger, and hers a hopeless withdrawal. So as I said, that is called Pandora's Box. Should remember that, from Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. This is one of the stories that I've written that actually has its genesis in a dream. I actually had that dream that the story opens with, of watching a large boulder underneath water, being pushed by two people to an edge, being pushed into the depths. I don't know why I had that dream. I don't know what the dream meant for me, but I do know that it stayed with me so vividly that I had to write. I had to write a story. I had to write it down. And I started the story basically with the dream that I had. And from that point on, the story, like so many of my stories do, so many writers have told me they've had the same experience, the story just took off. I didn't know when I started to write the story who the characters were going to be. I didn't know anything about a trunk, a baby's layette, a layette for a baby boy. I didn't know anything about the dysfunctional relationship between two people, two married people. I knew none of that. I just started writing the story, and the story came, and I wrote it down and got to the end. I won't tell you what the end is, but I had a sense as I was writing the story how it was going to end, like the big picture ending. You know, I can usually tell you as I get into a story, this is going to be a happy story. This is not going to be a happy story. In this case, I had an idea how the story was going to end, but the particulars, the interactions, the details that would take the story from start to finish, those I did not know. And if I recall correctly, the story went through several iterations until I finally settled on exactly how the story would conclude. So if that little taste of the story of Pandora's Box intrigues you, then I hope you will pick up a copy of Peripheral Visions and Other Stories, read the story, and see if the ending is what you expected, and how the ending made you feel. And then let me know. Let me know if you enjoyed it, if the story moved you, if it reminded you of anything. In the meantime, I look forward to reading you another excerpt the next time we get together for story time. Thanks so much.